You signed the divorce papers before you even asked if I was okay. Caleb's voice cut through the kitchen like cold glass, and Maya felt that sentence land in her chest before she even looked up. The rain was hammering the windows of their house in Westchester, the kind of gray, ugly night that made everything feel smaller than it was. She stood near the counter with one hand resting lightly on her stomach, the other still holding a half-packed cardboard box, and for a second neither of them moved. Caleb Sterling looked untouched by the weather, untouched by her, untouched by anything that mattered. His shirt was still crisp. His watch still caught the light. His expression stayed flat, like he was closing a business deal instead of ending a marriage. Maya swallowed hard. I was trying to talk to you all evening. Caleb gave a short laugh that wasn't really a laugh at all. About what? How hard your life is. How you need me to keep carrying everything. She stared at him, almost stunned by how fast his voice had gone from annoyed to cruel. I'm not asking you to carry me. No, he said, stepping closer. You've just been standing here pretending this marriage still means something. Maya's fingers tightened around the edge of the box until the cardboard bent. She could hear the rain, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock over the stove. Small sounds, normal sounds, but everything inside her felt like it was cracking. Caleb, I'm pregnant, she said quietly, as if the words themselves might force him to slow down. He looked at her stomach, then back at her face, and whatever she hoped to find there simply wasn't there. And, he said, one word, flat, empty. Maya blinked, trying to process it. And that's your child. You think that changes what I see? He asked. I see a woman who keeps making excuses, a woman who won't admit she doesn't belong in the life I'm building. Her throat tightened. The life we're building, she corrected. Caleb shook his head. No, you don't get to say we anymore. That hit harder than she expected. Not because it was loud, but because he said it so easily, like he had rehearsed it. Maya looked around the kitchen, at the mug he left in the sink every morning, the magnet from their trip to Chicago, the little bowl by the door where they dropped their keys. All of it suddenly felt borrowed. So that's it, she whispered. You're just done? Caleb reached into the drawer beside the fridge and slid a thick envelope across the counter. It's already handled. Maya didn't touch it right away. Her eyes fixed on the words stamped across the top in black ink. She knew what it was before she opened it. The room seemed to tilt. You had this ready, she said. Caleb folded his arms. You make everything sound dramatic. No, Maya said, her voice barely above a breath. You did this before I even walked in the room. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not regret, just irritation, like she had finally become inconvenient. Maya slowly set the box down. Her hand was shaking now, but her voice stayed steady. I'm not begging you to stay. Caleb stared at her, almost surprised. Maya lifted her chin, took one long breath, and stepped back from the counter. Because in that one terrible moment, standing in the rain-lit kitchen with her heart breaking clean in half, she understood something he hadn't. Caleb thought he was throwing away a woman with nothing. But Maya had been hiding her whole life inside a name he had never bothered to learn. Maya did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the spare bed in the guest room, the one Caleb always called the office, until he needed it to store things he did not know what to do with, and stared at the envelope on her lap until the ink on it blurred. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. Caleb had gone upstairs after their last conversation like nothing had happened, like he had not just torn the floor out from under her and left her standing there in the dark. Every so often she heard his footsteps overhead, then the soft sound of a drawer closing, then silence again. Maya pressed a hand to her stomach and took a slow breath. It is okay, she whispered, though she was not sure if she was talking to herself or the baby. By morning, Caleb was gone. She knew because his side of the closet was empty, his coffee mug was missing from the sink, and the bathroom light stayed off the whole time she was in the kitchen. No text, no apology, not even a short message to say he would be late. That silence felt worse than anger. It felt practiced. Maya made tea with shaking hands and sat at the kitchen table in the same place where they had once planned nursery colors and argued over baby names. Now the chair across from her looked like it belonged to a stranger. When she finally opened the envelope, her fingers trembled so badly that the papers slipped once onto the table. Divorce papers. Her name printed in clean black letters. His signature already there. Even the date was filled in. She read the page twice, then a third time, as if the words might change if she looked hard enough. They did not. A cold pressure moved through her chest. Not shock exactly. Something heavier. Something quieter. Caleb had not just made a decision. He had prepared for it. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was her sister, Rachel. Maya almost did not answer, but she did. "Hey," Rachel said, her voice instantly soft when she heard Maya's silence. "You sound awful. What happened?" Maya stared at the divorce papers. "He filed." There was a pause. "Filed what?" Maya let out a shaky breath. "Everything." Rachel went quiet for a second, then said, "Where are you right now?" "At home." "Do not stay there alone." Maya looked around the kitchen, at the little crack in the counter, the grocery list still stuck to the refrigerator, the framed photo from their last beach trip that Caleb never took down because it made the house look more expensive than it was. It all felt strange now, like a movie set after the crew had left. "I do not even know what to take," Maya whispered. Rachel's voice sharpened. "Take your documents. Your medicine. Your clothes. Anything important. I am coming over." Maya opened her mouth to say she was fine, but the words would not come. Fine was a lie, and she was too tired to dress it up. When she stood, a wave of dizziness rolled through her, and she caught the edge of the counter. Her stomach tightened, not with panic this time, but with a small, steady reminder that she was not alone. That one simple fact made her eyes sting. Caleb thought he had stripped her down to nothing. He thought she would fold, cry, maybe beg. But as Maya stood there in that cold kitchen with the papers in her hand, she realized something else was beginning too. He had not broken her. He had just forced her to see him clearly. And once she saw him clearly, there was no way she could ever go back. Maya packed the things she could carry in less than 10 minutes. A duffel bag, her medicine, her laptop, a folder of documents she had not looked at in years. Rachel showed up 40 minutes later with a coffee in one hand and a look on her face that made it clear she already knew this was bad. "Say the word, and you are staying with me until you figure out your next move," she said, setting the coffee down beside Maya on the counter. Maya managed a tired smile. "That might be the first kind thing anybody has said to me today." Rachel's expression softened. "He does not get to make you disappear, Maya." That line stayed with her as they sat at the kitchen table and went through the papers one by one. Bank statements, insurance notices, a copy of her marriage license. Rachel frowned when she saw how little was in their shared account. He really moved fast. Maya said nothing. She already knew Caleb had been planning this longer than she had realized. What she had not expected was how calm the truth felt once it was sitting in front of her. Not easy, not painless, just clear. A little later, after Rachel went to the bathroom, Maya opened an old folder at the bottom of her bag. It held things she never talked about. A private number, a business card with a name on it, and one letter she had carried through 3 apartments and 2 states without ever letting anyone see it. Caleb had never asked why she kept that folder. He had never cared enough to wonder. That had been part of the problem from the start. Years ago, before Caleb, before the house in Westchester, before all the little compromises that slowly started to feel normal, Maya had been living under a different set of rules. She was not the woman people imagined when they looked at her in a grocery store line or saw her sitting quietly at a coffee shop with a paperback and a cheap latte. She had chosen simple on purpose. Chosen it because when you grow up around money, you learn very quickly how many people can smell it on you. Her family name opened doors everywhere. It also attracted the wrong kind of attention. So when she left for college, she made a decision. No luxury apartment. No flashy car. No name dropping. No one was going to know what she came from unless she decided they earned that truth. Caleb had seemed different. Charming in a real way at first. Funny. Confident without being loud. He liked that she did not act impressed by money, because she had made sure he thought she did not have any. For a while, that had felt like freedom. For a while, she thought being loved quietly was the same thing as being loved well. Then the comments started. Tiny ones. Ugly ones. About rent, about groceries, about what kind of woman should help more, should need less, should be easier to manage. Maya had swallowed every one of them because she wanted the version of him she met in the beginning to still be real. Now, sitting at her own kitchen table with her sister watching her like a guard dog, Maya finally understood what Caleb had never understood at all. She had not married beneath herself. She had married someone who mistook her silence for weakness. And that mistake was going to cost him more than he could imagine. Maya had barely finished a second cup of coffee when her old phone lit up with a number she had not seen in years. She froze for half a breath, staring at the screen, while Rachel looked up from the stack of papers spread across the table. "Are you going to answer that?" Rachel asked. Maya did not speak right away. The number belonged to a world she had left behind on purpose, a world of private cars, long hallways, and people who knew her last name before they knew her face. She finally swiped to answer. "Maya Whitfield," she said. There was a pause on the other end, then a familiar voice. Calm, measured. "Miss Whitfield, this is Daniel Mercer. We spoke once before about your trust." Maya closed her eyes for a second. "Of course. Of all the mornings in the world." "I remember," she said quietly. Rachel mouthed. "Who is that?" But Maya just held up a finger. Daniel went on in the same steady voice. "I was told to contact you only if there was a change in your personal situation. I am sorry to say that your family office has been notified by your husband's attorney." Maya sat up straighter. "Why would he call you?" "Because he is trying to settle things quickly," Daniel said. "And because he still does not seem to understand what he is actually dealing with." Maya looked across the kitchen, past the coffee mugs and the half-packed bag, to the rain sliding down the window. Her stomach tightened, but not from fear this time. "Tell me what you know," she said. Daniel did not waste words. He explained that Caleb had triggered several financial reviews by filing the divorce the way he did. He had assumed Maya had nothing separate from the marriage. He had assumed wrong. Very wrong. There was a quiet sound from Rachel, like she had just realized the room had shifted under her feet. Maya stood and moved toward the hallway so she could hear better. Daniel continued. "There are assets in your name, access restrictions, and one pending inheritance structure that your husband was never informed about. If he has already made statements about your financial position, we should document them now." Maya gripped the phone. "He told me I was nothing without him." Daniel gave the faintest pause. Then he is about to learn that he was standing next to someone he never bothered to understand. Maya looked at her reflection in the dark hallway mirror. Tired eyes, bare face, sweater sleeves pushed up over her wrists. She looked ordinary in the way people like to mistake for harmless. But standing there with the phone pressed to her ear, she could feel something old waking up inside her. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Clearer. "What do I need to do?" she asked. "Nothing public," Daniel said. "Not yet. Do not argue with him. Do not sign anything else. And whatever he sends you, keep it." Maya almost laughed at that. Caleb had spent years acting like she was the one who did not belong in his world. The truth was, he had been living inside hers without ever realizing it. She ended the call and stood very still for a moment. Rachel came into the hallway behind her. "Okay," Rachel said carefully. "That does not sound like ordinary divorce lawyer stuff." Maya turned, her expression different now. Sharper. "It is not." Rachel studied her face. "Maya, he thought he was throwing away a woman with nothing," Maya said, her voice low but steady. "He should have checked the name on the papers before he got too comfortable." Maya did exactly what Daniel told her to do. She did not call Caleb. She did not sign anything. She did not post a single word online. She sat with Rachel at the kitchen table, while the rain kept tapping at the windows, and she waited for the next move to come from the man who thought he had already won. By late afternoon, it came. Caleb texted first, then called twice, then texted again like nothing had happened, like she was still the woman who used to answer before the second ring. "Are you at home? We need to talk." Maya read the message and said nothing. Rachel glanced over. "Let me guess," she said. "He suddenly discovered manners." Maya gave a small, tired smile. "Something like that." Another text followed. "I did not mean for things to get ugly." Maya stared at those words for a long time. That was the part that almost made her laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. Caleb had always loved the clean version of himself, the version where he was merely practical, merely honest, merely doing what had to be done. He could ruin a woman and still try to sound like the reasonable one in the room. She set the phone down without replying. 10 minutes later, Rachel's expression changed as she looked at her own screen. Maya," she said carefully, "you might want to see this." It was a photo from a finance blog. Caleb, standing outside a sleek downtown office building, smiling beside a woman Maya had only seen once before. She was younger, polished, the kind of woman who always looked like she had never had a bad day in her life. The caption beneath the photo said Caleb Sterling in talks with investors for a possible relocation and new partnership. Rachel let out a long breath. So he is already doing the whole fresh start thing. Maya took the phone and looked at the picture for 1 second, then handed it back. Let him. Rachel frowned. That is all you have to say? Maya leaned back in her chair. He wants to look like the man who moved on first. Fine. Her voice was calm, but it was not soft anymore. He just forgot something. What is that? Rachel asked. Maya looked toward the hallway, where her bag was still sitting half open on the floor. He forgot I am not the person he met. That evening, Daniel called again. This time his tone was slightly different, less formal, more direct. We have confirmed the trust structure, he said. Caleb was never listed as a beneficiary, and he was never authorized to access the family office records. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. There it was. The thing Caleb had spent years looking right past because he never thought to ask the right questions. Daniel continued. There is also a board update next week. If Caleb keeps making public statements, it will not stay private for long. Maya looked at Rachel, then out at the darkening sky. The room felt different now. Not lighter exactly. Stronger. Like the air had changed. He kept telling me I had nothing, Maya said quietly. Daniel answered. Then he should have made sure that was true before he said it. When the call ended, Maya stood in the middle of the kitchen for a long moment, one hand resting on the table, the other on her stomach. She could still feel the old hurt sitting under her ribs, but it was no longer the only thing there. Under it was something steadier now. A decision. Caleb could keep calling. He could keep posting polished lies. He could keep building whatever new life he thought he deserved. Maya was no longer trying to stop him. She was simply getting ready to remind him who had been standing in the shadows all along. The next morning, Maya opened the front door and found a thick cream envelope sitting on the doormat like it had been placed there by someone who expected to be obeyed. No return address. Just her name, written in neat black ink. Rachel, already halfway through her coffee, leaned around the corner. Please tell me that is not another surprise from Caleb. Maya bent down slowly, picked it up, and turned it over in her hands. No, she said. This is different. Inside the envelope was a letter from a law office in Manhattan, along with a formal notice that made her breathe a little less easily. Caleb had filed paperwork trying to freeze certain assets and pressure the settlement into something fast, something cheap, something that would make Maya look like the one scrambling. Rachel let out a sharp sound. He really does not know when to stop. Maya read every line twice, her face unreadable. There it was again, that same ugly pattern. Not enough to simply leave. He had to try to control the story on the way out. He had to make sure she looked small. He is trying to force me into signing before I have time to understand what I am looking at, Maya said. Rachel shook her head. Classic Caleb. He does not just want out. He wants you to thank him for the exit. Maya almost smiled, but the expression never fully formed. Daniel had warned her to keep everything, and now the reasons were becoming painfully clear. Caleb was already moving pieces on the board, but he was doing it like a man who had never imagined the board belonged to her family in the first place. By noon, Maya was sitting across from Daniel Mercer in a glass-walled conference room downtown, the city looking sharp and far away beyond the windows. He had the kind of calm that made panic feel embarrassing. A tablet sat open in front of him, and a stack of documents was arranged beside it with military precision. He filed too quickly, Daniel said. That is usually a sign of panic dressed up as confidence. Maya folded her hands in her lap. He has been very good at pretending confidence. That is why he is making mistakes now. Daniel slid one paper toward her. This is the trust summary. It was never meant to be public, and he had no legal path into it. Maya scanned the page, then looked up. So he really believed I was just some woman with a bag and a broken heart. Daniel gave a small nod. Yes. And people like him tend to confuse quiet with powerless. Maya looked down again, this time at a section of the document that carried her family name in crisp type. The old part of her, the part she had buried under grocery lists and ordinary days, felt suddenly awake again. Not loud, not dramatic, just awake. What happens if he keeps pushing? She asked. Daniel steepled his fingers. Then we stop pretending this is only a divorce. Maya looked up. What does that mean? It means he has been speaking publicly about your finances, your character, and your position in a way that will not hold up if challenged. He paused, then added, he wants you cornered. That is the only reason he is moving so fast. Maya leaned back in her chair and let that settle. Cornered. It was such a Caleb thing to assume. That if he pushed hard enough, she would fold. That if he talked first and loudest, he would own the truth. But truth did not belong to the loudest person in the room. It belonged to whoever had the facts. And Maya had been carrying facts he never asked for years. When she left the building later that afternoon, the air felt colder, cleaner somehow. Rachel was waiting in the car, watching the door. Well, she asked. Maya slid into the passenger seat and closed her eyes for 1 second before answering. He is not going to like what comes next. Rachel started the engine and gave her a side glance. That sounds like the first good news all day. Maya looked out at the moving city, her reflection faint in the glass. Caleb still thought this was the part where she got scared. Instead, it was the part where he finally started losing. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, folded in thick white cardstock with Caleb's name embossed at the top, as if paper that expensive could make bad intentions look polished. Maya stood in the hallway with it in her hand for a long moment before Rachel looked up from the couch and asked, "Please tell me you are not going." Maya let out a quiet breath. "I did not say that." Rachel gave her a look. "That is exactly how you say you are going." Maya almost laughed, but the sound stayed trapped somewhere behind her ribs. The invitation was for a private investor dinner downtown, the kind of event Caleb loved because it made him feel important and untouchable. She could already picture the room. Dark wood, low lighting, expensive wine, men in tailored suits pretending they were not measuring one another. And now, for reasons he clearly thought were clever, her name was on the guest list. Daniel had called earlier that morning and said only one thing: "Do not react yet. Just come." So Maya did. She arrived in a simple black coat, hair pulled back, no jewelry except a pair of small gold earrings that had once belonged to her mother. Nothing loud, nothing flashy. But when she stepped into the lobby and saw Caleb across the room, she felt the air change anyway. He was standing near the bar with 2 investors, and the same woman from the photo, her hand resting lightly at his arm like she had already decided she belonged there. Caleb's smile was easy, practiced, the smile of a man who thought the room was still his. Then his eyes landed on Maya. The smile did not disappear right away. It just got thinner. "Maya," he said, too casually, as if they had bumped into each other at a grocery store instead of at the edge of a fight he had started. The woman beside him looked her over with open curiosity. "You did come," Caleb added, and there was something almost annoyed in the way he said it. Maya gave him a small nod. "You asked me to." One of the investors glanced between them, sensing tension but not yet understanding it. Caleb lifted his glass, trying to smooth the moment over. "We are handling everything privately." Maya looked at the glass in his hand, then back at his face. "That is interesting," she said, "because you have not been very private." The nearest man shifted uncomfortably. Caleb's jaw tightened. "This is not the time." "For what?" Maya asked softly. "For you to explain why you told people I had nothing?" A few heads turned now. Not enough for a scene. Just enough to make Caleb notice. That was the beauty of it. He had spent years speaking about her like she was disposable, and now his own room had gone quiet to listen. Daniel appeared beside her then, calm as ever, carrying a slim folder under one arm. Caleb's face changed the moment he saw him. "What is this?" Caleb asked. Daniel did not even look at him first. He turned to Maya. "The board received your documents," he said. "Everything is confirmed." Caleb blinked once. "What documents?" Maya finally met his eyes fully. "The ones you never asked about." For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. Not angry, not smug. Uncertain. And Maya understood, with a strange and steady clarity, that this was the first real crack in the version of himself he had built so carefully. He had walked into the room expecting her to be embarrassed. Instead, he was the one standing too close to the truth. Maya did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The room had already gone quiet around her, the kind of quiet that tells you everybody is listening even when they pretend not to be. Caleb stood there with his glass still in his hand, looking from her to Daniel and back again, like he was waiting for somebody to explain the joke. No one did. Daniel opened the folder and set it on the edge of the table between them. "The documents you dismissed last month were reviewed by the board this morning," he said evenly, "and the trusts are now fully active." Caleb gave a short, uneasy laugh, but it did not sound real. "What trusts?" Maya took one slow breath. "The ones tied to my family office." The words landed hard enough that the nearest investor stopped pretending to check his phone. Caleb's face changed first in the eyes, then in the mouth, then in the little muscles around his jaw that had always tightened when things stopped going his way. "Your family office?" he repeated. Maya looked at him, calm and almost sad now, because the truth was no longer painful in the same way. It was just plain. "I was not hiding money from you, Caleb. I was keeping my life private." The woman at his side finally stepped back, as if she had just felt the floor tilt under her. Caleb shook his head once, slow and stubborn. "No, that is not possible." Daniel slid one page forward. "It is possible. In fact, it is already verified." He tapped the paper. "You were never listed as a beneficiary, never authorized to access records, and never cleared to speak publicly about her assets." Caleb stared at the page like it had personally insulted him. "I have never seen this before," he said, but the words came out weaker than he meant them to. Maya let out a small, tired breath. "That is because you never asked what I came from. You only asked what I could give you." There it was, the sentence that pulled the whole thing into focus. One of the investors near the bar cleared his throat and looked away. Another took a slow sip of wine, suddenly very interested in the tablecloth. Caleb had built himself a life on looking certain in front of other people. Tonight, certainty was leaving him by inches. "Maya," he said, softer now, almost careful, "if this is about the divorce, we can talk privately." She almost smiled at that. Privately. That was always the word men like Caleb used when they wanted the truth to stay small. "No," Maya said. "We are done doing things privately." Daniel shifted the folder under his arm. "Your public statements about her finances have already triggered legal review. If you keep speaking on record, you will make that process faster." Caleb looked at him, then at the guests, then back at Maya. It was the first time Maya had ever seen him without an answer ready. "You let me think," he said slowly, "that you had nothing." Maya held his gaze. "You wanted that to be true because it made you feel bigger." For a long second, nobody moved. Then Caleb glanced down at the document again, and Maya saw it. That tiny crack in his expression. Not defeat yet. Not all the way. But enough. Enough to know he was starting to understand that the woman he had thrown away was not standing in front of him by accident. She had been standing in his life all along, and he had never once been smart enough to see her clearly. Maya stood there long after the room, stopped pretending not to stare. The music from the dinner had gone soft somewhere behind her, but she barely noticed it. Caleb was still looking at the papers in Daniel's hands like he expected them to turn into something easier. Something he could push back into the dark with one stubborn sentence. They did not. Nothing about that night was going back to the way it had been. At last, one of the investors gave a polite cough and murmured something about another meeting, and suddenly the room began to thin around them. People who had been leaning in moments ago now found reasons to leave. A woman picked up her bag. A man checked his watch. Even the woman at Caleb's side stepped away without saying a word. That silence said more than any argument could have. Caleb looked around and seemed to realize, too late, that no one in the room was on his side anymore. "Maya," he said again, but this time his voice had changed. It was lower, slower, almost tired. She turned toward him fully. There was no rage in her face now, no tears, just a steady kind of disappointment that hit harder than shouting ever could. "You should have asked who I was before you decided what I was worth," she said. Caleb swallowed. For once, he did not have a quick answer. Daniel closed the folder and stepped back, giving the moment space to breathe. "Any further contact about the divorce goes through counsel," he said. "That includes public statements." Caleb nodded once without really hearing him. His eyes stayed on Maya. "I did not know," he said, and the words came out thin, almost childlike. Maya let that sit between them for one long beat. Then she answered, "That is the problem. You never cared enough to know." It was not cruel. It was simply true. And truth, when it finally arrives, does not need to raise its voice. Caleb looked like he wanted to say something else, something that might pull the night back together, but nothing came. Maya could see it now, clearly enough to feel almost calm. He had spent so long building his confidence on her silence that he never imagined what would happen when she stopped protecting him from himself. She gave him one small nod, not forgiveness, not peace, just the kind of acknowledgement you give to a closed door. Then she turned and walked out of the room. The hallway outside was quieter, cooler, cleaner. Rachel was waiting near the elevator, and when she saw Maya, she did not ask a single question. She just wrapped her in a tight hug and held on for a second longer than usual. "You okay?" she asked softly. Maya looked straight ahead as the elevator door slid closed. "I will be." And she meant it. Not because the pain was gone. It was still there, tucked under her ribs like a bruise that had finally stopped bleeding. But pain was no longer the biggest thing in her life. Something else had taken its place. Respect. Boundaries. Peace. The life Caleb had thought he was ending was only the life Maya had outgrown. Outside, the city was bright and busy and completely unaware that one woman had just taken her power back in the middle of an ordinary Thursday night. Maya stepped into the cold air, one hand resting lightly over her stomach, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe all the way down. Caleb had wanted a wife he could undervalue. What he ended up losing was a woman who never needed him in the first place. And that was the part he would spend the rest of his life trying to understand.